well. Chris Hall is the CBC's former national affairs editor. He joins us right now in studio. Chris, thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here, Michael.
So why is the government, striking this more cautious tone? What's behind that?
Well, I think in the past, Mark Carney was guilty of exceeding or setting high expectations and not meeting them. So I think this time around, they understand the difficulty of working with Donald Trump. They understand that he can be one thing in public when you're there sitting with him and another thing as soon as you leave the room. I think they're trying to set expectations a bit lower. So if something does come out of this, they can say, look, we did better than we might have thought. If nothing comes out of it, it's just another part of the process of being able to try to negotiate a new deal with around the sectoral tariffs of steel and aluminum. Then they have an opportunity to say, like, we didn't go in expecting that, but we made our case. And at face time, the risk reward is there. The risk is you don't get anything, but you set the expectations so low that that's probably a better situation. The reward is you get to deal with a guy who's going to make the decision in the final analysis, right? So dealing with Donald Trump directly, I think Mark Carney has calculated that this is an important meeting to have so you can continue to show that we are engaged and that he understands that Canada wants to make a deal. We just have to figure out what the parameters are.
But without a doubt, this meeting happens at a critical time for Canada, because when you look at investment, when you look at economic growth, when you look at employment numbers right now, Canada is up against the wall on a number of fronts here. Can you put this visit into some context for us?
Yeah, I think it's very important right now to understand that with the tariffs being what they are, that jobs are being lost in key sectors, particularly in Ontario. So politically, the imperative is here to do what Doug Ford says. Is it to show that we're strong and we're prepared to negotiate from a position of strength? Or is it with Daniel Smith from Alberta saying, we need to carve out some exceptions. Maybe we should get rid of that or lower the 10% on oil and gas imports into the United States. So I think it's really important right now, given the economic circumstances that we're seeing. The economy is slowing. As you pointed out, unemployment was 7.1% in August, likely to be at the same types of levels. I think he needs to show that understand that I have promised to get this negotiation done. We've set 2 deadlines, we've missed them, but we are still prepared to work as hard as we can to get those tariffs at least reduced.
Okay, at least reduced. Talk to us, though, a bit about the change in strategy, because we have seen a couple of moves since that last visit, in the spring, Mr. Carney's first visit to Washington. Very positive, overtures after that meeting, but now since then we've seen the bringing back the counter tariffs, getting rid of the digital tax that both seen as irritants by the Trump administration. Talk to us about the change in strategy. Is that fair to say that's what's happening?
I don't know if it's an evolution as opposed to a change. Remember, in May, a lot has happened. It's a lifetime ago. A lot has happened since then. We had the digital services tax removed. We put in a lot of money, billions of dollars into defense spending. Both of them key demands of Donald Trump. So depending on your point of view, you're either trying to work and find common ground to get some kind of reciprocity, some move by Trump to ease tariffs, or you're caving. Whichever view you have, it's pretty well ingrained right now. So what's changed is we've done a lot to try and appease Trump. We've done a lot to try to meet him on some of his terms. And what we've gotten back as a country, Canada, is very little. We haven't had in fact, we've had worse. We had a 50% tariff now on steel and aluminum and copper. We've had new and increased levies on softwood lumber and furniture. So I think this is a comparative. He needs to show that I am in charge of these negotiations. I'm prepared to sit down with President Trump. I'm prepared to do what I did last time, which combined a little bit of flattery with the importance of this relationship. And the more you meet with Trump, the more you are able to make that case, and the more you give him what he wants, or at least gives him an opportunity to show that he's a strong leader too, that will work in your benefit.
Interestingly, I spoke to Louise Blais last week, a former UN ambassador for Canada, and she shared with us that based on the conversations she's had with Republicans in the United States, the Carney government is failing to make a personal connection with Trump, the kind of connection that's needed to bring about a deal. What do you take from that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting position, because clearly Donald Trump is a guy who wants to make deals. Wants to make deals where he's the winner, but he wants to make deals. As I said before, having a chance to sit down with him is a better opportunity than passing it by. As we understand, the invitation came from Donald Trump when the two of them met on the sidelines at the UN a week ago. And I think that's an important indicator, because people wanted to meet Mark Carney in New York, and Trump would notice that. And he understands that despite what his rhetoric is about we don't need anything from Canada, the truth is that the Americans do. The costs of those tariffs haven't been passed on to consumers yet. So the personal part of it I get now is that the FaceTime is good, but at the same time, I think the Trudeau policy in the past of trying to engage with senators, with congressmen, with governors, this is coming into a 2026, which is a midterm election year. As costs begin to get passed on to consumers of these imports on steel and aluminum autos, I think that they understand that there's a potential here to move some of the people that Trump needs to make sure he keeps control of Congress. At the same time, I think there's been this evolution. Carney is a player on Bay Street. He needs to get better known on Wall Street too. He needs to get better known on Pennsylvania Avenue. So the more often he can actually get down there, I think the better it is for Canada.
Okay, so politically then, what is at stake for Mark Carney? Because on the one hand, you've outlined a bit of the challenges he faces, but I also, in what you're saying, I can see how it might actually be a pitfall for him here at home as it opens him up to criticism from the opposition.
He did promise that we have negotiations finished one time midsummer, then a time at the end of August. Both dates went by. Canadians are feeling the pressure. Prices are higher. We haven't seen a whack of new housing started despite the creation of this new agency. The Major Projects Office, these are 2 years or more down the road. He needs to start showing some results. And as I said, if you're dealing with Donald Trump, it's better to be doing it face to face. He values those personal connections. So, yeah, I think the pressure is on Mark Carney now. The polls show that people are becoming a little bit frustrated with the lack of progress on some of these key issues. He pitched himself as the one who was best able to deal with Trump, who had the knowledge and the background and the connections to get the economy working again. All of those things are off in the future still. And so I think he now has a crunch that he has to deliver more immediately than perhaps he might have thought when he was first elected back in the spring.
We're watching. And, to the numbers, David Cloutier from Abacus Data will join the program a little bit later. But, Chris, thank you for starting the program with us this evening. Thank you for the time.
Okay, cheers.
Take care.